Hello AOS fans, it's me Pete and I'm here to go through the Daring Delvers deck that came with the Gnarlwood Season of Underworlds. Now the first thing you notice when you open this pack is it has this little card on the front, Daring Delvers, with these little marks down the sides. It's called a plot card and it's basically a nice little touch they put on the Rivals deck, which means it has a little theme. It's got a little challenge that goes with it alongside all of the other things you've got to do, and it helps tie all the cards and things together so they're all working towards a purpose, or at least some of them are. In the case of the Daring Delvers deck, if you include one or more cards in your deck that bears the Daring Delvers symbol, you must show this card to your opponent in the Reveal Your Warband step and use these rules in the game. Your exploration count starts at 0. You increase your exploration count by 1 when you place a feature token during a round, and if you don't know what that's all about, do go check out our other video where we explain the new changes in Gnarlwoods. At the end of the action phase for each friendly fire that is on a feature token that is not in your territory, so again you're going to want to put objectives into no man's land or into your opponent's territory. At the end of the action phase for each surviving friendly explorer that's not in your territory. Now it doesn't say here what an explorer is, but it'll become obvious once we go through the rest of the cards. So this is all about getting to your opponent's territory and getting onto objectives and things like that. You decrease your exploration count by 1 to a minimum of 0 at the end of the round for each enemy fighter that is on a feature token that's in your territory, so you don't want your opponent to get on a feature token in your territory. So let's start looking at these cards, and we'll start with the ploys. The first one is a domain card, Grasping Rootgrave. You cannot play this card in the final power step of a round. At the end of the action phase, you deal 1 damage to each fighter adjacent to a feature token. This effect persists until the end of the phase or until another domain gambit is played. That's quite nasty, dealing 1 damage to everybody. I could see the Gits and other numerous warbands having a real headache with something like this as you start peppering wounds on everyone. Good for Nurgle when you want to dish out those wounds, and also the Dread Pageant. Next is Conquered Spirit. Play this only if your leader is inspired. Increase your exploration count by 1 for each enemy fighter that's out of action. Now this could be quite handy if your leader's inspired and you're up against a multitudinous warband that you've killed lots of. That could help boost your count quite rapidly. Next is Flame Wisps, which is a denizen card. You choose 1 friendly fighter and 1 enemy fighter within 3 hexes of that fighter invisible to that fighter. You roll 2 magic dice or 3 magic dice if the chosen friendly fighter is a wizard. If you roll 2 or more matching symbols, you deal 1 damage to the chosen enemy fighter. I like this. It's a little bit random, but it's a chance to do an extra damage to somebody, and it's always nice to have some ping damage in there, which definitely goes along with some of the other cards in this deck. We then have a trap, Quick Roots. This is a reaction. You place after an enemy fighter's activation if that fighter has 1 or more move and or charge tokens, so basically if they've moved or charged, deal 1 damage to them. Combined with Flame Wisps and Grasping Rootgrave, this could be quite a nice one to start really mounting up that ping damage quickly. We then have Significant Find. You can pick one. You can either place 1 available feature token in an empty hex, and again if you're not sure about available feature tokens and how that works, do check out our video about Gnarlwood and all the new rules in there. You can place it in an empty hex, 2 or more hexes from each fighter, which might be quite tough depending, or you can increase your exploration count by 1 if 1 or more surviving friendly explorers are not in your territory. Next up is Solid Position. Friendly fighters in enemy territory cannot be pushed. This effect persists until the end of the next power step. This could be quite handy if you've got lots of people standing on objectives in your opponent's territory and you're looking to cash in loads and loads of points for your exploration count. We've then got the Spirit Snare Cavern. This is another domain card. After a fighter's charge action, that fighter's player rolls 1 attack dice for each fighter in their warband that is out of action. If they roll 1 or more crits, deal 1 damage to the fighter that made the charge action. This effect persists until the end of the round or until another domain gambit is played. It's good to make your opponent think twice before charging, especially if there's been lots of fighters taken out, and again it's more ping damage. Tangled Roots, another domain card. After a fighter's charge action, stagger that fighter. This effect persists until the end of the round or until another domain gambit is played. So again, might make your opponent think twice before charging, and staggering someone means you can then go and attack them and get a little bit more of an advantage yourself. Temporary Haven. Pick one. Place 1 available feature token in a hex occupied by a friendly fighter not in your territory, or increase your exploration count by 1 if 1 or more friendly fighters are each on a feature token not in your territory. So again, there's a little bit of a requirement there to get this, but it's a way of getting you some more exploration points. Zone of Control, another domain card. Fighters are on guard while they are in starting hexes or on feature tokens. This effect persists until the end of the round or until another domain gambit is played. Again, very handy if you're standing on feature tokens, you don't want to get pushed off of them, and it also applies to everybody on all hexes, so it could be double-edged if your opponent's standing on some too. And And then on to the upgrades. The first is the all-terrain gear. This fighter is an explorer, so that's how you get explorers in this deck, as mentioned on the plot card at the start. The fighter gets +1 move, or +2 move instead, whilst the domain gambit isn't persisting. And there's quite a few domain cards in this. You could get that +2 move quite a bit to help people run around all over the place. Next is Claim Jumper. This fighter is an explorer again. Fighters adjacent to this fighter cannot be given guard tokens or be on guard. That could be quite handy if your opponent's getting very defensive. Then Conqueror's Circlet. This has to go on your leader and it gives them +1 move. Each other friendly fighter's move characteristic is equal to this fighter's move characteristic, which could be quite handy if you've got some extra +1 move cards and then you've got a generally slow warband. This could help speed everybody up. We then have the Dowsing Limb. This fighter is an explorer again. It then has a reaction. After this fighter's activation, scatter 2 from the fighter's hex and push this fighter up to 2 hexes along the chain. So you don't have to, but it could be a great way of getting them to move even more around the board, albeit a little randomly sometimes. We then have the Enshrouded Shot. It's an attack action that has 2 hammers and 1 damage and has Grievous 1 if you roll a crit. It has a range of 4, which is pretty nice, but it has the Earth Shrouded ability, which means this fighter can only make this attack while on a feature token. Well, you're going to be standing on feature tokens a lot with this deck, so you might as well get a nice range 4 attack out of it. The next is Final Say. It's a reaction card after a gambit is played that chooses one or more friendly fighters, give this fighter 1 charge token and break this card. When you do, the gambit is not resolved. So whilst there aren't quite so many distractions rolling around anymore, this is great to protect one of your fighters from a ploy or gambit that you might not want them to suffer from whilst they're standing on a hex that you need to keep them in. The next is Gifted Sight, which is a mutation. I don't think we've seen any of these before, not in this deck or elsewhere. This fighter is an explorer. Also, blocked hexes do not block line of sight for this fighter, which is quite nifty. They also gain the reaction that after a friendly fighter's attack action that takes an enemy fighter out of action, if this card is in your hand, you can give this upgrade to a fighter and it doesn't cost any glory, which is quite handy. We then have 9 lives. This fighter is an explorer, and when this fighter would be dealt damage by a gambit or lethal hex, roll a magic dice, and on the lightning, this fighter is not dealt the damage, so you've got a 1 in 3 chance to not take damage there, which sometimes could be quite handy. We then have Plundered Knowledge. It's a reaction after this fight's activation in which its attack action took an adjacent target out of action. Pick 1. You can increase your exploration count by 2, which could be very handy, or you can draw 2 power cards, also very handy. We've then got Prospector. This fighter is an explorer. It gains a reaction. After this fighter's activation, place 1 available feature token within 1 hex of this fighter and then give this fighter 1 charge token. That can be very handy because you do want to be placing available feature tokens, and this deck gives you that ability a few times over, and that all helps you gain more exploration points. We're then on to the objectives, and the first is Uncovered Secret. It's 3 glory, and it's a surge. You score it immediately after a power step if your exploration count is 10 or more. I think that's going to be tricky to get to, but it's something your opponent might not be able to stop you doing very easily, so it could be an almost unstoppable 3 glory. I did fail to mention that this deck also has 6 Surge cards in it, which is quite nice. Next up is Terra Incognita. It's a Surge dual card. You score it immediately after activation if a domain card is persisting, which is pretty easy and pretty unstoppable because there's quite a few domain cards in here, and 1 or more surviving friendly leaders and or explorers are not in your territory. So it's probably quite easy to score, I think it is, in the early phases of the game at least. We then have Sudden Demise. It's a Surge hybrid again. You score immediately after an enemy fighter is taken out of action by a lethal hex, or an enemy fighter is taken out of action by Gambit, and there are quite a few ping damage cards in here, so it should be quite easy to do that. Failing that, just go and attack someone and knock them into a lethal hex. There's also 2 glory, which for a Surge card is pretty amazing. We then have Stealthy Advance. It's another Surge dual card, which you score immediately after a friendly fighter's attack action if that fighter was in a cover hex or a lethal hex or on a feature token when it made the attack action, and that fighter was not in your territory when it made that attack action. So you do want to get lots of those tokens into no man's land or in your opponent's territory. We've then got Pathfinders, another Surge hybrid. Score this immediately after a power step if your exploration count is at least twice the round number, so you've got 4 in round 2, or your exploration count is at least equal to the number of rounds, and 1 or more friendly fighters or explorers. I think it's going to be easier to score the second way than the first, but you never know your luck here. It's again something your opponent's going to struggle to stop, I think. Then Brave the Root Maze, another Surge. You score immediately after an activation if 3 or more friendly fighters are each in a cover hex or lethal hex or feature token. So you only got to get 3 fighters on. Might not be too hard to score that one, especially if you've got Gits and you do a scurry at the start. Boom, 1 glory. Then Bold Adventurer. It's a dual card and you score it in an end phase if a friendly leader is in a cover hex or a lethal hex or on a feature token. And that leader is in enemy territory. I don't really rate this one. It's very similar to some of the older cards. Making you get your leader into enemy territory can be a problem, so I don't think I'll rate this one very much. Brilliantly though, it does have Sanson on the card, and if you spotted it on the previous card, there was Gerzax. That's 2 Season 1 warbands. And it is a third, Severin Steelhearts. It's Cautious Venture. This is a dual card you score in an end phase if 2 or more surviving friendly fighters are in enemy territory and your expiration count is 3 or more. I think this could be quite scoreable, and it's 2 glory, which is never too bad. What's this? Another Season 1 warband. It's the Angry Dwarves. Claim Guardians. A dual card which you score in an end phase if 2 or more surviving friendly fighters are each holding an objective, which those dwarves do like doing, and your expiration count is 5 or more. That's a bit trickier, but it's 2 glory again, which could be quite nice. Next is Fearless Explorers, and of course Garrick's lads are all Fearless Explorers. Loving all the Season 1 warband pictures in here. This is a hybrid that you score in an end phase if 2 or more domain cards are in your power discard pile, which should be quite easy to do because there are a lot of them in your deck, or your expiration count is 5 or more. Either of those I think should be fairly easy to pull off and your opponent can't really stop it. Next is Sleepless Sentries. You score this in an end phase if each enemy fighter is within 2 hexes of 1 or more friendly fighters. And then the last card, Survivalist. Again, it's got those angry dwarves in there. You score this in an end phase if each friendly fighter has 1 or more upgrades and or is in a cover hex or on a feature token. And that could be quite hard to score because it has to be each friendly fighter, and I'm not 100% sure it's going to be the most scoreable with larger warbands to do, but it's only 1 glory, so it's not the end of the world. So that's the Daring Delvers deck. I really like this idea of each Rivals deck having its own little challenge going on in there and its own little special rules. The only problem I do have with that is having to remember warband special rules alongside rival deck special rules may be enough to fry my tiny brain, but we'll have to see how that goes. Let me know in the comments below which cards do you like in there, which do you think are the best, the worst. Are you just loving all of this Season 1 art like I am? And don't forget to like, subscribe and ring that bell. All of this stuff, thumbs up and comments really help to push the channel out further and get our content to more and more people. And the more we can do that, the bigger we'll get and the more we'll do. It's a never-ending awesome cycle. So see you soon. Bye!